Well, thank you, sir. So welcome to this week's TOC meeting, where we've got a fair few bits on the agenda. We've got our regulars of reviewing actions from last week and reviewing the outstanding PRs. And Peter's joining us today to ask about what's happening with CFF and supply chain attacks and mitigation of. Then we've got a vote on an RFC in there, an update from the app deployments working group, and then space for any other business. Has anyone got anything else to add at this point?
Yeah, I'm working on a GitHub project. I created one to track all the jammy work across all the working groups.
Okay, cool. I'll add that one on. Cool. So if we do the actions from last week, Eric, you've done yours clearly, and I have attempted to implement previous project suggestions, and we'll figure out how well that's worked as we go through the process. So reviewing the project board, and I will actually do a screen share for this one when it loads. No. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so we have our project board in here. So this is conveniently using the automation that Ruben's put together to drive it, and we've filtered through for things that need to be reviewed, etc. So well, that's one that we've got coming up. And there's the process for there. So we may as well just start at the top on this one. So we've got an RFC for the role change process, which is open, and we have had agreement that it's, or partial agreement that we're in with the RFC final comment period on here. Stephan, what's your thinking? All okay or not?
Yes, I wanted to get an answer by Ruben, especially what I conceptually don't like is that we have a huge Cloud Foundry YAML that is partially manually maintained and partially generated. Usually that's asking for trouble. So I'm tending to be against this process. I'm fine if we would say it's just for now, we don't have a well-written process. We need one right away. We don't have the automation. So let's continue with this Cloud Foundry YAML for 2 more days. And then the big solution comes and cleans up everything. Then I'm fine and we can merge it. On the other hand, I don't know if that's a good RFC that is undocumented and needs to be replaced right away again. That's why I would prefer to have a separate contributor YAML file that adds all the contributors, that has a clear higher level concept. It's not technically GitHub teams, but it's about roles. And then there's an automation that merges the working group charters and this contributor YAML and maybe an exception YAML, what we talked about, I think last time. And then this big Cloud Foundry YAML falls out and gets applied. It sounds for me a better technical solution.
Okay. So
yeah, I would agree there. Like I wouldn't want to rely on that like big org.cloud foundry file that is just a temporary thing. Maybe it shouldn't even be in the repo at some point. Like ideally we get into a state where that whole structure is generated on the fly from files that have more meaning to it, like that are actually related to the roles that we have assigned to people. It's more of an implementation detail, I guess, that file.
Yeah, but now we carve it sort of in stone as part of an RFC. That's, don't know if we should do that. I mean, if we say automation will take longer time, but we need something now, and this is a workaround until this automation is there. expected lifetime, I don't know, 2-3 months, and we want to have an RFC on that right away. Okay, why not?
But I mean, like, I would say we can better have an RFC that we say like we should put it in that separate file, right? And then we can do the manual sync with that Cloud Foundry file in the meantime.
I understand a bit the reason why Greg started this was that there was no, let's say, procedure description what a working group lead should do if somebody needs to be added. So that's why we wanted to have a real step 1, step 2, step 3. So it's also a valid reason. Maybe we modify the RFC in such a way that we say as an intermediate solution, this Cloud Foundry YAML may need to be added manually until an automation is in place, but we describe already the intended goal. That means workgroup charters and maybe an additional contributor YAML. Yes. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't bother with documenting the behind the scenes, right? Because that's that's going to change, right? So how it's just magically going to work once they end up in that file, and probably that's going to be manual for a bit. But then we don't have to change the RFC once the automation is there. And actually, the automation is not that difficult. It's more like blocked on these things not being there, right? Because once we start tracking the contributors this way, then we can start automating. Otherwise, we would remove too many people from the organization if we start running the automation.
I mean, it feels a little bit chicken and egg, this one at the moment.
Like maybe the more important part that is maybe also unclear was maybe like, how is that kind of voting done if somebody should get those roles, right? Who checks if they fulfill the requirements for those roles, these kind of things. And the other part is the technical part of they need to be added to this YAML file. Maybe we can just remove that and make this an implementation detail of that process. I mean, to give them the permissions. Of course, we need then the mechanism, right? So maybe that could be split up.
Yeah, maybe we really remove the Cloud Foundry YAML file from this RFC and simply define one contributor YAML, because we reference in this RFC also the workgroup charter. So for approver, everything is, let's say, fine.
Okay.
So if you want, I can try to propose something for this contributor YAML, modify the RFC and give that another round. That would mean that we, for now, cannot start with this final week, because.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I could, let's say, take from the current Cloud Foundry YAML the list of contributors and move it over. I mean, there's an overlap between the contributors and approver, but well, the automation probably has to deal with this, which is should be no harm. But in my real solution, I would say that it should work out the org membership generation if an approver is not part of this contributor YAML.
Ideally, the people that get this role initially are the people that are not in any team.
Yeah, let's see if I find an easy way to extract that. That would.
That's just some JQ magic.
Yeah. Sure. Let's see. Okay, I will take that with me and come up with a proposal.
Okay, cool. So then I just want to check which one. Yeah, repository ownership is, we'll cover that one off at this point. We may as well. So where have we got to on this one? We've got 3. You've got, yeah, 3 out of 5 on here, and we are at the week-long final comment period. Eric, I will pass over to you at this point.
Yeah, I think this is pretty much exactly a week for that final comment period. So that's closing out. Since all the TOC members are here, I'm wondering if we can just get a final vote on accepting this. I don't think we had any comments during the period, actually.
Yep, I'm seeing no comments. So yeah, hopefully we can just get those last couple and then away we go. Okay.
Well, I mean, can we just do it right now so that we're not leaving this dangling?
Go on, David and Jan, it's you.
Oh, I think Jan said he might be away from the keyboard.
Ah, sorry, I missed that one. Okay.
See, I haven't approved this, huh? Interesting.
Yeah,
I could approve it. I could, yeah.
I don't need to. Button, we've got quorum then.
Yeah, I think actually you're right. We do have quorum, counting me. So.
Cool.
Okay.
Done.
Great.
Okay, I've got working. Now the next one for us is the election docs.
Yeah, Eric, I looked at your, I didn't dig in too deeply, but I looked at your Electo instance. I like logged into it. That worked. I gave it permission to access my GitHub. But yeah, I'm not opinionated at all about what we use for the voting. But it would be good to, if we are going to stick to the dates that were in there, which I basically put just exactly 1 year from what they were last year, then tomorrow we would send out something to CFF kicking off the nomination process. And that's pretty easy. That's pretty straightforward. It's just done via GitHub, and that lasts for 2 weeks. And then after that, we would send out, notice to all of the eligible voters and a post too saying, that's gone out. If you are an eligible voter and you did not receive an email, please, reach out and you can also vote. So yeah, that's the idea. So I think if we can get this in some state merged for tomorrow, then I can put out a CFF post kicking off the nomination period. And then, that's all that really has to happen in the next 2 weeks, if we want to stick to these dates.
Sounds good to me. I've had a look through and there was nothing in there that I thought needed changing in particular.
I basically copied it verbatim from a year ago.
Yep.
And then, but if we want to update the voting method with Eric,
that's true.
We can do that.
I think it's worth mentioning that, like, Eric and I have been talking about the fact that we're holding the top 2 slots, so we're not eligible for re-election right now, but we're not thrilled about that because we'd like there be an opportunity for a VMware person to also join the TOC and take one of our places. So we're considering that plan. We haven't figured out if one of us is gonna step down to make room, and if so, who. Well, but we're considering that plan.
Yeah, I mean, I have no opinion on that either way. I will say, before we put out the notice that the nomination period is open, it would be nice to tell people explicitly if VMware people are eligible or not.
Exactly.
So I would say there's a bit of a time crunch on that. Otherwise, people will just nominate people from VMware, and sorry, thanks for playing.
Right, and that'll be sad.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, I think, best form to let people, if that is the case, and both of you are continuing on in your 2-year terms, then it would be best to let people know when we start the nomination period so that there's no thought going into this for no reason.
Sounds good. Don't send out that without talking to us then.
I will not
Chris.
send that out.
I'm
I will-
sorry, we don't have a good answer for you yet, but we should, because I think
Yeah.
this is probably the right thing for us to do. You know, we both kind of want to make room for others, but we both kind of are enjoying it. So we have to, one of us has got to figure this out, right?
I mean, another thing that I would say is I don't think it's a terrible thing if this whole, if everything gets pushed back a week. I just put in the dates that were like 1 year from last one. But if this all happens 1 week later, I don't think anyone's going to mind. I don't think
Agreed.
that's so. I'll hold off on that until I get final word from the two of you on what you're going to do with that. But having said that, well, and then I guess merging this in too, it'd be best to get the dates set, and we can
Yes.
merge this in direct, like minutes before I put out a CFF Dev post, so that can all happen pretty quickly on the fly. So let's hold on that, and yeah, maybe get this done tomorrow, or if it needs to get pushed out a few days, that's fine.
Okay. Cool. So that's that on the TOC and review. Then we've got some working group related ones to look at in particular. So there's an addition of the policy client repo, which I pulled the wrong one on for the app runtime working group team. So they've been flagged. And I also did the same with this one, I believe. Yes, I did. And I should remember to have caffeine before I operate the keyboard. Okay, so they're in process. Then we have adding repos to the FL working group. So these are just incubation transfers that you undertook for us, Chris. So I think we've got plenty on there that have already said yay to that one. So I think we are good to go once those conflicts have been resolved. Are you happy to have a look at that one, Chris?
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Basically, there's just been some that have already been merged in, or so I need to remove those.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Orphaned repositories. I think we are okay on that one, just to merge those in. Yep. Yep, we are okay with that one. So that's that one in. And then we've got adding some more garden repos, which these are entirely new to me, the Master of Cats org. It's not one I know. They do exist, however, and these are for the app runtime platform working group. So it'd be handy if we could have a bit of a nosy at this one during the next couple of days, just to make sure that it is all good to merge in. Okay. Then we've got a couple of blocked items in there, one of which ties into Stratos and what's happening with that one, which we don't know yet, but we should probably discuss that. And so Norm was looking at this, but we don't know what's happened. Has anyone heard anything?
I think Norm mentioned in a call a few weeks ago that he's still working on getting alignment from the Strike and Win folks about supporting this.
Okay.
So maybe next time he services, we can check in on this.
All right, cool.
Just over in cloud.gov, we have a new engineer who has been poking at Stratos and kind of throwing his hands up in horror. And so we're also looking at PaaS admin, but it is, at this point, the code is pretty tightly coupled to the way GDS does things. So just speaking as a community member that needs a user dashboard, we're struggling. I'm not sure if that's a helpful comment or not. There you are.
Peter, is that a vote for or a vote against Stratos? or neither at this point? Still evaluating?
It's a vote for something needs to happen. And if, I mean, we already have Stratos implemented. So if cloud.gov doesn't want to be wholly responsible for Stratos, but we could certainly participate if other people are also like coming together around it. Maybe it'd be something where interested parties come together, and if we realize we're not all in it alone, but could divvy up the work somehow, then it's easier to stay with a tool than to migrate to another one. Lovely as PaaS admin may be, the fewer resources we can put into a dashboard right now, the more we can focus on other things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And the final blocked one we've got is the Cred Hub moving, which is all kind of in that legally, no one's quite sure what to do with that one. I believe our last bit was it was whether it could be transferred over, and we didn't get any clarity on that one from LF Legal and VMware. Do we know what we're going to do in that case? Because I guess either it's a closing it off situation.
Yeah, that was rejected by LF Legal due to that proprietary license in there. It wasn't compatible with the Apache 2 license, so that there would have to be significant changes to that. So I believe that is just going to stay with VMware for now.
Great, let's close it.
Yep. Chris, do you want to put some words into that effect and close it?
I will do that. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And are there any others on the board that we want to pull up as a particular to look at the moment? Oh, okay, cool. Did that board prove useful to people?
Yes.
Cool. All right, and I can tick off an action then as well at the same time. So that's brilliant. And we are now have Peter.
And hi, I jumped in earlier. I'm Peter Burkholder. I'm security and compliance lead for cloud.gov over here in the USA. And we have been getting the first of what we expect to be an increasing number of questions in terms of how we can attest to the our ability to practice supply chain risk management for our platform built on top of Cloud Foundry. And it's a bit of a hand wave exercise at this point. I just put some notes in the agenda because I didn't want to run on too long saying, well, supply chain risk management is probably a good idea, and it's also a requirement. It does actually seem to be more useful than other things that are thrown around as requirements like 5140 and DNS spec. We are seeing adoption in terms of Paketo now generates SBOMs. What kind of investment should the foundation be looking at in terms of, say, adopting the SLSA levels that show that we practice particular methodologies to ensure that our builds are not compromised, and then to also generate software builds of materials to show that we know where our pieces are coming from and attest to some sort of provenance. And what do folks think?
I love this, but we haven't invested in it, you're right. I mean, it's been coming out through Cloud Native build packs and that's it. So to your point, maybe in Slack, the fact that we're not including Cloud Native build packs yet in Cloud Foundry, main Cloud Foundry is problematic because you don't get to generate from that like Cyclone DX or whatever the format of the software build materials that they dump out, which is really cool. But that doesn't fully solve the problem, right? That's just like one piece of the supply chain system. You know, there's all these Bosch releases, there's Bosch itself. Ruben's been thinking a little bit about it with me around what could BOSH do to kind of track where things came from? Are there small feature sets to BOSH that enable the tracking of these things? That's kind of one thing that's potentially on the table. Another is like, well, we actually have to go track down where all this stuff came from and write it down using that BOSH thing. And then there's like, how do we maintain our build systems so that they are more compliant with I get it, best practices there. And then there's the source code management part of it. And this is a real fun problem for me. I've been working on this at VMware side for a while, and it's really neat because it breaks down into all these pieces. We haven't really adopted formally any of them in the open source. And I think it makes sense to decide where we want to go. And we should pick that destination to be not so ambitious that we'll never achieve it. But like, because I don't know where we're even aiming for in the as an open source community, like, I don't know how to get us there. But like some sort of like reasonable middle salsa level might be an example proposal there.
And it's certainly something that lends itself to breaking down into iterations. I mean, the stem cells, to start with, you know, we're starting from Ubuntu. We should be able to generate a software bill of materials there. It seems like just for general operator sanity, that BOSH should make it easier to track where your releases are coming from. And if people wanted to like generate an SBOM and include it in their release, that would be something that could be picked up without making it a requirement. And so there's the two parts, you know, how do we manage our VMs? And then what's the potential for generating SBOMs from what we're building on top of stacks and build packs.
But how useful is an SBOM without like actual provenance?
I don't know.
Because I mean, like, yeah, you can generate a list of what packages are installed, but you have no certainty about the integrity of those packages, right? So, because if you really want to do it, like have proper provenance, then it becomes quite a different complex problem. Because then you have to like deal with the whole stem cell, but basically you have to rebuild the whole stem cell builder, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably also need to change the whole release format, like BOSH release format, to have some more metadata about where blobs are actually coming from. So you wouldn't pull them from a blob store, but you pull them from an actual source and like verify the SHA-SUM, those types of things. Apart from that, like I actually don't know if you, since you're not building it per se, if you're not using a compiled release, maybe you can get away with that a bit, right? You're basically just taking sources and putting that together in a big tarball. You're not compiling it, so maybe we have some wiggle room there. But yeah, it's a major big architecture.
There's like what Peter suggested earlier, Ruben, there's the cheap version, which is like BOSH enables release authors to package software bill of materials along with their releases. Like you could do this right now. Maybe not, because BOSH will strip them out, right? But it seems like a very cheap thing we could do would be allow BOSH to carry that information. We could also use Gripe or something like that to generate a software bill of materials on the stem cell after the fact. Be like, this is what we think is on the stem cell. It's not great. It's not provenance, which just tells you where things come from and the supply chain for how they got there. But it's like, this is what we think is on the stem cell. This is the kind of thing we need, probably a document that describes what the standard we are hoping to achieve, possibly a like minimum standard that we're willing to accept, and a best standard, like this is where we'd like to get to eventually. And so then we can figure out, like ideally we'd all be signing up for working collectively on that minimum standard, right? In which case the minimum can't be so high that we're never going to do it. But like maybe our best practice one could be a little higher, and we can try to shoot for something. Because some of our releases are probably easier to get into this state than others, so there's no reason to limit ourselves there either. The problem is we need somebody to drive that recommendation, right? Somebody's got to build that document. That might be something I can do. It sounds like it's something that Peter's interested in, cloud.gov is interested in for obvious reasons, because it's standards they care about. Who else cares about this topic?
Well, the Linux Foundation's been talking about it a lot. I haven't like worked with anyone there to actually help Cloud Foundry with it, but I can certainly I mean, I can get some recommendations from them, and yeah, at this point, all I've heard is people talking about it and people talking about how important it is. But as far as actual implementations, I don't know much. But I can try and get some resources there. I mean, I won't drive this, but I will reach out to folks at the Linux Foundation and try and get whatever resources we have to help this. So I can do that.
Well, here's what I'll volunteer to do. I will start a group, a working group. That's Peter and I and anybody else who says they want to come. It'll probably be during like US times, mostly is because we only have so much, like this meeting is eating a lot of, and so on, of my Europe collaboration times. But if someone can really push hard and we'll move it around, otherwise it'll be like a more US East-West Coast friendly time slot, maybe every like 2 or 3 weeks for a bit while we draft, and we'll use that time to draft a proposal, which we'll bring to you all about like, this is where we'd like to go in terms of various levels of compliance, ideally. Is
it worth possibly looking to include someone from the vulnerability working group in that as well?
We could. There's some very knowledgeable people over there, right? I mean, there's very knowledgeable people all over the place. Like I've got one of the salsa authors that I work with at VMware. I could have him come join us and talk. Like I don't think there's anything inherently connected, right? The vulnerability working group tends to deal with vulnerabilities discovered after the fact. They haven't expanded their scope would be another way to put it. So Lee brings up an interesting idea, which is like, is there a working group that already could own the definition of the drafting of this problem? And it totally didn't occur to me because I always view the vulnerability working group as an after the software's been published vulnerability management, not a supply chain security, but like commonly in enterprises, it's often a similar set of people or a similar group that handles both. So I think we should include them. I will definitely include like Paul or somebody or, Monty or both. And then we can see how much they want to own that definition going forward.
It doesn't help though with the meeting scheduling, because I think all the existing working group meetings of that working group are actually in private. And this should maybe be a discussion that is in the open for everyone interested to participate.
Well, it's a scope expansion.
Doesn't help with that. Yeah.
Right. So like what we're discussing, what the TOC could decide is that this working group now includes this additional scope. It'd probably be I think that's a reasonable idea going forward. And I think I would still want to work with them. And I bet Peter, I bet there's a bunch of interested parties too that would want to be involved in helping draft that. But like who really owns this problem from a working group allocations perspective is probably them. It's inappropriate for us to like fully decide without any of them being present or their input, probably that they own it, but like, so maybe this looks like rather than me, okay, I'm backing this up. I'm not starting a group to meet about this. I will draft a PR that amends the scope of their charter to include this problem set, and we can get their feedback on it. And we could start with that, because I think if we can get agreement that they own this problem, then I'm going to ask them if they could set up a community-focused, recurring conversation for all the interested people to come together and start drafting something. If they can't own it or think that they really own a very different set of problems and they convince us that they're right, then I could drive it.
Okay, cool. So we have some way forward. David, to create things, I will put as an action related to SBOM.
I'll just create an SBOM. I'll run gripe on the stem cell right now or whatever. Create one SBOM, done, next problem.
Cool. All right. So at this point, we can skip over the TOC vote on the RFC because that one's done and dusted. So it's time for an update from the app Runtime Deployments working group.
Yeah, so hello, everyone. As you know, I have the honor to lead the app Runtime Deployments working group since a few weeks now. I can give you a short update what we have done so far. So share my screen. So for now, I've started with all the organizational stuff. So we have a regular community meeting. Thanks to Chris for supporting me with the Google Calendar. So it's the second Thursday and the fourth Thursday now. We have a Slack channel and everything set up for communication. I will take meeting notes. I've done some more organizational stuff like tagging the repositories with the CFF tags. I've aligned the roles, the GitHub teams and orgs. So that's now all up to date. And yeah, now we have just in our current sprint, so in our SAP sprint, we are now about to start with the first real story, and that is setting up a new Concourse. This Concourse should host all the pipelines which are currently hosted on the VMware Concourse, so that we can then migrate over the pipelines to the new Concourse. It will be set up similar to the Bosch stem cell Concourse, so to this instance, and we will be reusing the Bosch community stem cell CI infra project. I'm already in contact with Ruben because well, there's some hard-coded stuff and it needs a little bit of refactoring to make it usable, but I guess we can get this resolved and then start migrating the pipelines.
Yeah, we should probably also rename the repo because it should be more generic.
If possible, we can rename the repo. Yeah, it's a bit, yeah, it's quite special naming. Yeah, of course, we can all do this.
That also brings up an interesting question of like who should own it then, right? Because then we can start having shared things, like a thing that's shared across working groups. I think we don't have that yet.
It would then be shared, yeah. So I don't know, does it need an owner or can we live with a shared responsibility?
I was about to add even a step further. Would there be anything speaking against co-owning an instance of Concourse?
Yeah, we talked about this. Like when Chip and Chris and I were long ago looking at like budgets for the CFF infrastructure, we were like, how many Concourses should we have and so on. The feedback has been that many working groups have enough Concourse stuff and have had enough problems with Concourse that they want to own it. I was immediately in the like, that's crazy, we need one Concourse, it's going to be amazing. But everyone who's tried to, VMware actually has extensive experience operating large Concourses that are quite shared, and it can be a disaster as well. So I propose maximum freedom here, which is we've budgeted for a small Concourse per working group. So Jochen, you can, I'm sorry, I don't remember how to say your name correctly.
That was correct.
Okay. We've budgeted for you to have your own, but if you don't want to have your own and you want to piggyback on somebody else and they're okay with that, I encourage that. What we don't have is a central infrastructure services group that can provide a shared Concourse for everybody. So it's really one working group agreeing to do a little extra maintenance work to help out another one by sharing, which I'm totally in favor of.
Yeah. Well, of course, it is a little bit of extra work, but nevertheless, the project has a nice feature set here. It's the Let's Encrypt stuff is integrated. The GitHub Teams permissions is integrated, which would be very useful because we can then easily assign permissions for our application runtime deployments GitHub team. So that would all be quite nice. And well, we are also experienced with Concourse, so I would expect it should not be too much effort. Yeah.
Great. There's a risk that this becomes the one big shared Concourse that everybody uses, or maybe there's a opportunity that this becomes the one big shared Concourse that people use over time. I'm not okay. I'm totally okay with that if that just ends up happening. I know that like Cappy and Routing and Diego have like very large builds that like run with very high resource utilization. So like it's possible that that doesn't make sense for it to be expand to that level, but it also possible that it can expand. I sure wish there was a really nice Concourse as a service SaaS offering that was like we could just pay for, that worked really well out there, that we really trusted. But unfortunately, it's also very important to us, right, that it works very well.
Just to throw in there, DJ over at Engineer Better was actually looking at something in that sort of a space, but part of the problem is he needs somebody to actually go and commit to purchasing it for a period of time so he can put the engineering team behind it. So that might be a discussion that's worth having.
Yeah, okay, fair.
And it's like, if I understood them correctly, then there are two Concourses already. They just share the kind of the repository that manages how this is installed, right? So we were talking about an own Concourse for the deployments working group, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There's one running for the Bosch stem cell stuff.
Got it.
Deployed with this repository, and now we are trying to deploy a second one.
I fully agree with David there. Like, there's no problem in having your own. I was just asking, like, if you already start to share kind of the maintenance infrastructure for it, if it might be worth considering just running one of those.
No,
but
I mean, running multiple Concourses, or like setting up a Concourse, is not a problem. Offering an SLA for a Concourse that works with multiple time zones of the different teams, that's the real challenge, right? And like, and especially when there's like pressure, right, to release something, and then you have to deal with your Concourse, and you're not like unable to debug issues with your own Concourse, then I mean, that's what you don't want.
Okay, but maybe there's like a Americas and Europe Concourse option here that we're not considering, right?
Yeah, maybe we start with a working group specific Concourse, because actually we are currently, that means as a SAP team, we are currently piggybacking the Bosch Concourse for running the CAPI performance tests. And when we set this up, we had a number of discussions with the other Bosch SAP team, and they said, well, let's start like this, but eventually you should have your own exactly because of these problems with we could use too many resources. There was no problem until now, and the setup hasn't changed. But let's maybe not or try that because CF deployment, if the Concourse is not working, then basically the working group is down, right? If the performance tests are not working, this is something that doesn't impact any releases at that moment.
Good. Okay, so the only thing that's missing right now is Google Cloud GKE account. I already talked to Chris about this.
Yep. So I hope to get you a GCP project set up this week.
Yeah, that would be perfect. Then we can get really started. I was considering testing it on our own Google account, but it creates a lot of resources, and I'm not sure if a cleanup effort is a bit too high. Good. So when the GKE account is ready, then we can really get started. Just one last thing I'd like to point out. So we are trying to create a publicly visible backlog so that everyone can see what we are doing. Currently, I'm trying to maintain this in the CF Deployments repository as a GitHub project with stories put into these nodes. That works quite nicely. The only thing is that you cannot really assign people to nodes, and it's not maybe really clear who is now working on a certain story. I see that the other working groups may have totally different approaches. Some use this beta project, some use the old GitHub projects. Internally at SAP, we are using Jira to track everything, which may be better suited for us for maintaining backlogs. So not sure if this is something you would like to discuss or if this is just good enough. And
I'd give again flexibility to working groups, whatever works for you. I have not enough exposure to the project's beta, but whatever I've seen, this is really great. I think it's better than Jira. I'm waiting, like I don't know, nails nagging somewhere that they eventually deliver it to GitHub Enterprise, and they just don't. They just want to have it finished in the public GitHub, so it's not available for my backlog work, which is in the old GitHub project. So I'd encourage to look at that, because it is a good issue tracking tool, I'd say. But like from a TOC perspective, or from my view on that, so a fifth of the TOC, it doesn't matter. It's okay if you do that on an old projects board. That would be fair as well.
Okay.
Also,
I think
there is some automation for using Projectvita to get the projects beta.
Yeah, there is the automation. I tried it already. It works fine. Yeah. I think the only disadvantage is that it doesn't seem to be possible to create new stories here. You have to put it all into GitHub issues. But I mean, if we are starting on a story like create a new concourse, that's not an issue. So yeah, okay, maybe this goes too much into detail now, but
by the way, I think in the table view, you can actually create what they call draft issues, or something that you could convert into a real issue, but they are really looking very much like an issue.
Okay.
It's at least there's a difference. Like in the old project board, the notes and real issues have massive differences, like you said, no assignees and others. I think in that project's beta, the differences are way smaller. And at least in the table view, you can definitely just keep writing titles, and you can give that content. So maybe it's worth checking out.
Yeah.
And also, I don't see a huge problem in creating issues for those things that are where you say it's not an issue. It's like it's something somebody should work on, right? So that's something fair tracking.
Lack of a concourse is an issue.
Lack of a concourse. If you phrase it like that, yes, it's an issue, right? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
But as I said, notes are fine as well if they are enough for you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. I think this would be all from my side. Any questions regarding?
Yeah. How's the Jammy Jellyfish adoption going?
Well, that's not started yet. We have actually a story for updating or releasing CF deployment with the bionic stem cell. Thanks to Dave from VMware, they have already done the work and released a new CF deployment with bionic. Actually, we wanted to do this, but the pressure was too high, so they did the release. But yes, this would then be the next story, or maybe an epic to start with Jammy.
Yeah, what would be really great to have is like a pipeline that runs in parallel, that's red, but where we like try everything, all the components with like the Jammy stem cell, so that we can have visibility in which components are still incompatible.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. This would be the next thing we should, when the migration of the existing artifacts has been done, then we should work on that. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. We need the concourse and the pipelines on this new concourse. Then I would personally really like that somebody outside of VMware cuts one CF deployment release just to ensure that this is working, and then I guess the Jammy pipeline can be set up.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
When you all are setting up new concourses, we do need to think about how large they're going to be from a budgeting perspective. If you don't mind, send Chris and I that information, and we can just double check our assumptions for how much we were budgeting per concourse. We weren't originally budgeting for GKE clusters, That doesn't really change things that much, but it depends on obviously how large they are and what the control plane for ATC, where that runs. I don't ever run Concourse on Kubernetes. Does the whole thing run on a GKE cluster? Like or is there's any, where does ATC run? Also on GKE?
I would assume so, yes. I think it's all on GKE.
Yeah.
Use
Great.
the Concourse
Great.
Helm chart plus a database.
Great.
Not too large.
Yeah, we originally.
Oh, interesting. You chose to run it on Kubernetes.
Well, we did not choose, but this is how the project here works.
Yeah, that's what we choose.
They use GKE, and yeah, why not? I mean, it has all the features we need. That's the main advantage. Of course, we don't care if it runs on GKE or on Cloud Foundry or somewhere else, but
it's just because it's the usual Docker in Docker problems, because like Concourse on there just scales a very large pod and uses Garden run C to schedule containers there, which might lead to problems or not. Like my team is running a Concourse on Kubernetes as well, so that works.
Okay.
But it's not really like first-class citizen there, and I think the Concourse team isn't really actively working on moving that forward, as far as I tracked it. Like,
agreed. That's 100% correct. It's so weird that it's like GitHub Actions, where you're like, oh, you're scheduling containers. This must work great on Kubernetes, and it's like, no, we run Docker inside of Kubernetes to run our own containers. I'm like, but that's a container scheduler, and they're like, no, we run containers on containers. Like that means you need privileged containers. Like, yep, and so on. I mean, one major advantage I see with the GKE thing could be that we could have one large GKE cluster for multiple Concourses potentially, and take advantage of burstiness across the board, right? Where we have a pool of compute that we get to share rather than dedicated compute. Anyway, we budgeted like 2 or 3 fairly large worker nodes per Concourse. So as long as you're running like a 3-node GKE cluster that's with reasonably large nodes or something, you're probably running exactly what we budgeted for.
Well, like we shouldn't maybe derail too much into that, but you could run that on VMs as well, right? There are worker pools you could assign workers to, so you could have a shared Concourse that does not share the workers between working groups, but just the web and other layers. And you don't need Kubernetes for that. And I don't think that Kubernetes helps a lot there, because like multi-tenant Kubernetes is, just like, some people might think it exists, right? Others don't agree.
The only reason why it was put on GKE was because it's easy to onboard, right? So we can just onboard people with just their email address and a Google account, and then all the authentication works that way, and we don't have to deal with LastPass and everything. So that was
that makes sense. Maybe.
So we just have one central source of like authentication.
Kind of even for infrastructure access, so to say.
Yes.
For installing Concourse. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, otherwise you would have to go, like, I don't know, bootstrap your Bosch and do all your Terraform stuff, and that just felt like a lot of bells and whistles.
Yeah, that's the other option.
I guess if you asked DJ, you could use something else, but yeah.
Yeah, I know that he thinks
I don't know it personally, and it's fine. Let's not derail too much. I was just curious because, didn't realize that was running on GKE really.
Yeah, okay. We will soon know how much effort it is to set up Concourse like this and how well it can be maintained and scaled.
Has already been running for quite a while on the Bosch side, so it worked pretty well.
I mean, it's working here nicely, and so that was our main argument to copy this approach, and okay. Yeah, so this would now be really everything for now from my side.
Thank you very much. So Ruben, got a couple of minutes for an update on your Jammy project. You're on mute.
Okay, now I'm not. I just there have been going, like, I've I'm getting pinged about like all sorts of issues with Jammy adoption. So I thought it would be good to have like a central place to keep track of that. So I thought maybe we can have a GitHub project just for that. So yeah, I don't know yet like what the working model would be, but I think it would be good to have some visibility. Maybe we can like even have a call about this, or maybe it's like a thing to track at the TOC level, right? Where we just like go over the board a bit because we want some visibility and like making sure that these things move along. And yeah, that's all actually. I mean, having a pipeline at the CF deployment level would really greatly help with validating these things that are here, right? Yeah, so I'm currently using one status label. So there's untested. Basically, that would be you create an issue with a thing asking, is it compatible, right? We don't know. Then it could be incompatible or compatible, and it can be in progress, as in it's known to be incompatible, but they are working on it. And compatible would be it is in CF deployment. It has been released, right? And everything is great. So yeah, it's grouped by repository, and the idea is to update these labels on all the things that are like related. So Bosch, for example, is compatible because it was updated to Ruby 3.1. We had to update the MariaDB connector, but we cannot update it yet in CF or in Bosch deployment because we also need to bump all the CPIs to Ruby 3.1. That has mostly been done, and then there's some CredHub things. Where's CredHub? It doesn't matter. There's also yeah, routing release is important. It's not compatible yet. PXC release not, and yeah, Cloud Controller I think is also still in progress. But yeah, this is probably not complete yet, but would be nice if there's more awareness around this also among the other working group leads, so that we can make this like a shared effort to keep this in, up to date.
One question regarding Ruby. Do you need Ruby 3.1 or is 3.0 sufficient? Because I know that copy release is currently going to 3.0. Okay, then 3.1. Okay, I will talk to
so yeah, it
maybe we should rewrite it in Go. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean that's probably less work. Can you just write a converter, Ruby to Go converter? That's probably easier.
Sure. I just take the what was it, basic to Java converter and change the words. Yes. There should be one.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that one then, sir.
Yeah, no problem.
Unfortunately, I have to disappear now, but thank you for a lovely meeting all. It's been a wonderful day, as always. All right. Cheers all. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
See you. Bye-bye.